Hey, Dorie, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
I'm good, Sonia. Thank you for having me.
It's,
Great to talk.
it's my pleasure. All right, well, let's go ahead and dive right in. I want to dive into your new book, Entrepreneurial You. I took all kinds of notes, and I just want to have you share more about some of the learnings and the findings that you had throughout your experiences, interviewing people, and then just laying it all out. So let's go ahead and start with a quote from your book that may make some people stop in their tracks. Let me just read it. It says, "The dirty secret of today's entrepreneurial economy, being excellent and even being well known and respected in your field, just isn't enough." So please elaborate on that, because I think that might shock quite a few people.
Yes, I so how I came to this realization
Mm-hmm.
was my most recent book, which we've talked about, Stand Out, is about how to become a recognized expert in your field, how to really, build up your platform, get known, get your voice out there. And that is critically important. Obviously, in a world with more competition, you need to differentiate yourself. You need to put yourself out there in such a way that people say, "Oh, I need to learn from her." But the truth is, because of the way that the economy has been evolving, it is entirely possible these days to be relatively well known and yet still not able to make a good income. And I think, probably you and I and your listeners all know people like this, people who are talented, who are smart, who have something really good to contribute, and yet they seem to still have trouble monetizing and bringing in a good living from doing their thing. And so that was the problem that I wanted to solve in Entrepreneurial You. I wanted to really create a kind of manual, a kind of roadmap that people could use to figure out that hardest last mile, which is how do you make money at what you want to be doing?
Got it. And that kind of leads into the next part of it, because you say that learning to be excellent at what you do and then actually making money from what you do and what you know are two completely different skill sets. So what are your thoughts on, is there one skill set that you need to work on before you follow with the other? Is it something that you do simultaneously? How do you develop both of these skills to be able to create a business that not only supports you but actually can help you thrive in doing what you love?
Yeah, it's an important question. And ultimately you're exactly right. I think where some people go wrong with trying to monetize, and especially online, is that there's sometimes this push to the quick hit, or like, oh, I'm just going to start today and I'm going to make $1 million tomorrow. And of course, you and I know that's not possible. That's not reasonable. It's not an effective way to be thinking. What we need to be doing before the push to monetize is two key things. One is building trust with your audience, and the second is going deep with your audience. And you can work on both of these things simultaneously, but they both really have to happen before you do full scale monetization. And so building trust with your audience often comes from doing a lot of free content. That could be things like this, like a video interview or a podcast or blogging, but somehow showing your audience that you know what you're talking about so that they can connect with you and say, okay, this person's ideas make sense. And then the other piece is going deep. And what I mean by that is especially, this can be done through coaching, through consulting, whatever. Certainly a variation would be very deep market research, but you want to make sure that you truly understand your customer before you get out there and try to sell people something. You have to know who they are, what makes them tick, so that you can really understand how you can help them. Once you have those pieces in place, then monetization becomes possible, and depending on the level of trust you built, sometimes even easy.
Right. Once you've got that level of trust, do you still need to be very deliberate in, because I think sometimes people are maybe hoping hoping that people will start knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, we'd like to pay you to help us with this particular thing." Is it a matter of being very deliberate with your marketing activities or the specific things that you do that actually brings the money in the door versus just sort of expecting that it'll sort of flow naturally?
Yeah, this is definitely something I talk about quite a lot in Entrepreneurial You. I mean, there's a lot of fear around monetization. I even have a chapter called "The Courage to Monetize" because this is the place where people often really feel like, oh my gosh, I could get rejected in a big way because especially if you're selling like a service,
Hmm.
as opposed to a widget, it's like, oh, it's about me, and so the sting of potential rejection is really acute. So a lot of times people are, in fact, very hesitant to ever ask for money or ask for the sale. Of course, we know rationally that in order to have a sustainable business, you have to get through that. You
Hmm.
have to find a way to do that. Otherwise, you can't keep having a business for free forever. You will have to shut that business down. So it isn't a really a necessary step. But here's the thing. If you are good at content creation, at building the trust with your audience, the selling process does become a lot easier. It doesn't ever take care of itself fully,
Hmm.
but if you've done that trust building, that really intensive marketing, what the sales process looks like is me saying, "Hey Sonia, I have this thing that I'm doing. Are you interested?" And you say, "Oh my God, yes, I really want to do that." And then that's your sales process. But that being said, you still have to ask. I can't wait for you to be like, "Hey Dorie, do you have blah blah blah?" I have to at least tell you about it. And if you've done the work beforehand, then it's a much easier process. It's not like I have to strong arm you to say yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction that you have to ask, but the asking becomes a whole heck of a lot easier, and it doesn't have to feel slimy or sleazy because you're giving people what they want already.
Exactly.
All right. Well, what is a portfolio career, and why do you feel like everybody needs one? You talked about this quite a bit.
Yeah, so a portfolio career basically just means you're doing multiple things, right? You have multiple income streams. It's not just like, oh, I have a day job, that's it. It's that you got multiple irons in the fire. And I think that this is increasingly important in our contemporary society because, of course, you never know what's going to happen in your day job. I started my career being laid off unexpectedly from my job as a reporter, and I realized then, at age 22, like, wow, this is not very secure here,
Mm-hmm.
apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And so having some kind of side project, some side income stream becomes very useful. The other thing, of course, is that in doing that, you are theoretically bringing in more money, which is always a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also teaching yourself new skills in order to do whatever the thing is that you're doing, whether it's a little coaching on the side, or you're starting an app, or you're, doing some public speaking, whatever it is. You're learning new things that you can apply and bring back to your day job that make you more valuable there.
Right. Okay. So as part of that building a portfolio career, you've done that, and you mentioned that you've got 7 revenue streams for your business, which is amazing. How did you go about doing that? Because I imagine you didn't start with 7, and you didn't maybe a year or two in, you didn't have 7. So what were sort of like, were there anchors, were there building blocks, and then you kind of stacked them along as you kind of, you know, progressed in your career and building your business?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, in fact, I didn't start with 7. I didn't stop with 7. I'm now up to 8 now.
Wow.
So it is something you can definitely build over time.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, it would be way over ambitious to say, oh, I'm going to start 10 new income streams this year.
Right.
You want to do a few things, master them, and then move forward. And so in my case, when I started my business, which was now 11 years ago, I did one thing, and that was marketing strategy consulting. And I did that one thing for probably 3 or 4 years. I also then brought in a second stream pretty deliberately that I wanted to do some business school teaching. So I
Mm-hmm.
started having that as a piece of what I did. And I was able in 2011 to sign my first book contract for my first book, Reinventing You, which was published in 2013. So that became an income stream of writing books. Once Reinventing You was published, then I started getting speaking engagement requests from conference organizers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was cool, and I began to get a little money from that, and so that became a fourth income stream. And then, as a result of my books, Reinventing You and Stand Out, as well as Entrepreneurial You, they're all aimed at the kind of individual market, not at the enterprise level, but aimed at individuals. And so I started getting requests for coaching. And that was something I had never done, but I got enough requests. At first I was like turning them away, but then I realized like, oh, that's silly. You should do this. So I started doing executive coaching. So that's five. And then the last couple of years, the thing that I've been focused on, starting to do some affiliate marketing, which is where if somebody has a product or course or something that you support, you let people know about that, and then if they buy a copy, you would get a commission off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also launching my own online course. So that was something new that I did. And then finally, the newest income stream, which started as kind of an outgrowth of the online course, but became its own thing, is live events and workshops.
Okay.
So that's eight.
That's a lot, but it's super cool. But and I like that there seems to be a common thread between all of them. So if you had to boil it down to, are there? Would you say that there's one or two things that are your core, and that the other things are sort of offshoots or kind of natural outposts of what the core things that you do for your business?
I think that in some ways the writing books is probably the
Okay.
core, in the sense that that drives a lot of other things.
Okay.
It's an income stream unto itself, but it certainly drives speaking engagements, and then the speaking engagements, that drives a lot of free, or sorry, the books also drive a lot of free media
Right.
that I do, and so then people might read them, and this happened earlier this week. A guy said, "Oh, I read Stand Out, I loved it. I want you to coach me." So you get a coaching client from that. So I think that's probably one of the starting places.
Okay. So you mentioned that it's a good process to move on to a different revenue stream once you've sort of mastered one. How do you know that you've achieved that level of mastery? Is it just sort of, okay, I feel like this is kind of humming by itself, or the process is working? Is there a specific distinction that you kind of look for to say, okay, I'm in a good position to turn my attention to something else?
Yeah, I don't really have a sort of formal point of demarcation where that happens,
Okay.
but it's really it's a little bit more subconscious
Okay.
about, do I do I feel stressed out about the process of this still?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm trying to figure it out. Like, okay, if so, I probably shouldn't move on to something else. Like you want
Okay.
psychologically to be in the place where you feel like, oh yeah, I've got this. I know how this all works, and then you start to get curious about something else.
Right. Now, do you do all this on your own? Is it just you? Your business is Dorie Clark. It's your name. It's your brand. Do you have people who are helping you set some of these things up and run them, or is you kind of tackling it all on your own?
Uh, Mostly it's on my own. I mean, it's not necessary to have a big staff or apparatus to do this. I have a part-time virtual assistant
Okay.
that works for me 10 hours a week.
Okay.
That's it.
That's awesome. That's awesome, and it's great to know that it doesn't have to be sort of this giant operation. We're going to get to a little bit of how you do all these things a little later. But before we do that, I want to just jump back into one of the things that you referenced. You did a lot of interviews within the book. One of the persons that you talked to, her name was Jenny Blake, and she mentioned the concept of a bridge income. Can you talk about why that might be useful for people as they're thinking about how to build their different revenue streams, and how to get to the place where they want to go by doing some of the activities that may not necessarily support them in the meantime?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad that you highlighted this because it is an important concept.
Mm-hmm.
So in Jenny Blake's case, her favorite thing to do is speaking and speaking engagements. But the thing about speaking engagements is they're a one-shot deal, so it's not recurring revenue,
Right.
and you don't know when they're going to come. It just kind of comes out of the blue and like, oh, good, I'll do that, and it's wonderful when it happens. But it's not like you have a predictable stream where you know for sure that something is going to take place. And so as a consequence, it's a little bit precarious to just sort of sit around and wish like, oh, I hope another one comes. So she had an activity that she enjoyed, but let's be honest, she enjoyed it a little less, which was coaching.
Okay.
And she, eventually she would have loved to have made a living just from speaking, but she realized, coaching is something that actually can be more sustainable because it's recurring monthly income. You sign, whatever, 6-month contract, a year-long contract, and so that the money is going to be coming in. And so that enables her to have that bridge so that she can do a little bit of that, but know that she's leaving herself open for speaking engagements, but she's not so reliant on that in a dangerous way.
For sure. Can you explain the difference between these two mindsets and how it impacted your earnings in your business over time? The one you talked about was the making money with something, versus making money because of something.
Yeah, this is a crucial point. So this language, this framework, is borrowed from a conversation that I had with a guy named Doc Searles, who's a internet theorist,
Okay.
and he talked about the distinction of, as you say, making money from something as compared to making money because of something. And just to give a kind of clear example, if you, as I was, if you were a journalist
Mhm.
and you're getting paid because you write articles, you are making money from writing articles. Pretty clear. I give you an article, you give me whatever, $500.
Right.
Simple. However, in the current economy, we have in a lot of ways shifted to a new way of doing business.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, journalism in particular has become just blown up, decimated. It's people aren't even getting $500 for an article anymore. It's like, no way. They might get $25 for an article, or more likely it's free. I used to be a paid professional journalist. Now I actually spend a significant amount of time still writing,
Mm-hmm.
writing articles, doing the exact same thing. I get no money for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we ended the story there, that would be a pretty bad story. That'd be pretty depressing. But the skill that more people need to have in the new economy, which is why I wrote Entrepreneurial You, is making this second order shift so that you say, okay, well, I might not make money from the article, but I could make money because of the
Mm-hmm.
article. And that's where we factor in creating multiple income streams. Because guess what? If someone reads the article and they say, Dorie, can you give a speech? Well, that's not $500. That might be $15,000.
Right.
If someone, wants to have a coaching engagement or they want to hire me to, do marketing strategy consulting for their company, all of that can be quite lucrative. So it's just figuring out ways to monetize around what you're doing.
So going back to where we started the discussion, is this the reason why some professionals who are great at what they're doing, they're experts, are recognized, is because they're making money from something, but they haven't made the shift to making money because of it.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, that is the challenge. At least it's one challenge. I mean, another one, of course, is just the perennial, people being nervous about asking.
Right. Such a simple thing, but so hard to do sometimes, right?
That's right.
All right. So, through your research and your own experiences, you identified and you walked through this in the book a 3-step process to creating a solid foundation that makes monetization sustainable. Can you explain those 3 steps and why you feel like the order is important?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, we talked about this a little bit, but it's really the question of first of all, building trust, then
Mm-hmm.
going deep with your audience, and then leveraging your IP. And the reason that is so necessary is that you, especially in the internet era, we are just bombarded with so many people, so much information, so much coming at you.
Mm-hmm.
And the sensible response for most people is just to shut it down, shut it out. If they can't tell who is trustworthy or who makes sense, they don't listen to anyone. They're like, la la la. You're never going to get through. And so the real challenge, if you ever want anyone to buy anything from you, is that you have to make that trust connection first. Otherwise, the sales conversation isn't even going to get started.
Mm-hmm.
So making an effort to share content, in whatever form, podcasts, blogs, speeches, whatever, but sharing content valuable content over a period of time is one of the most essential things that you can do.
Okay. All right. Now, speaking of that, I saw that you said you wrote for Forbes, sharing your content for 3.5 years, more than 250 articles for Forbes alone, in addition to all the other ones that you were doing. And you said that it took you a couple of years of blogging multiple times per week before you actually started to see anything meaningful happen in terms of inbound requests for, say, speaking or consulting or coaching. What did you do to keep going and to strengthen your faith that this was a fruitful activity whenever you were at maybe 6 months down the line or a year down the line, and the money hasn't started rolling in automatically just yet?
Yeah, it's so important. So I would say there's really two questions, or two answers here.
Okay.
The first one is, a way that I was able to keep going was that I made sure that writing the articles was valuable to me, not just for the long game, but also for the short game.
Okay.
And what I mean by that, the long game, of course, is you produce content and then people just like find you. They come to you. That's amazing, but it does not happen right away. So you have to be patient for that. But the real question is, well, what can you do in the short term that makes it useful? And so I used Forbes in particular as a networking platform for myself.
Okay.
Because people were pretty willing to be interviewed by Forbes. They're like, yeah, sure. We've literally almost everybody I asked was like, yes, I will do it. And so it gave me this pass basically to meet whoever I wanted to meet.
Mm-hmm.
And that was very valuable to me early in my career, because I was just starting to build my network, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I can just, pick them, and then they'll say, then we get to spend an hour together. So that made it worthwhile. Okay. The other piece is, I am a really big fan of making sure that you are tracking and celebrating small wins.
Okay.
And this is something that I talk about in Entrepreneurial You. In particular, I share the story of a woman named Stephanie O'Connell, who was she moved to New York to be an actress, and she wanted to be on Broadway. And in order to be able to stay in New York, she realized that she would need to get a handle on her money. Mm-hmm. So she started this blog called The Broke and Beautiful Life, which I think is a great title. And the blog began to get some traction. And the way that she was able to stay focused and keep up the momentum and keep posting, even when it was a little challenging to do so, is that she just really did focus in a great way on the small wins. Like, she told me she remembers the first time that an influencer that she respected retweeted one of her posts. And it's like, yes, that is a sign that I'm heading in the right direction. Or alternately, the first time she actually got paid to blog, it was $25. That's not a lot of money, but it wasn't zero either.
Right.
Someone saying this is valuable. And so today she's a very well recognized personal finance expert, but it took her a while to get there, and she was able to keep the faith by seeing and celebrating those small wins.
That's definitely helpful. That way, that if you look back, you may not be where you want to be, but you can tell you're not where you started. So that progress it's definitely beneficial for sure. Now, as you're going along, building trust with an audience, trying to find out more about what they want, a lot of people sort of default to doing that on social media, but you say it's kind of it is a dangerous thing to rely fully on social media as your way to build trust and engage with your audience. Why is that?
Yeah, and boy, I can tell you have read this book, Sonia. This is great.
Great book.
Yeah, very, very detailed questions. I love it. Yeah, you're referring to a section where I was talking to a woman named Natalie Sisson, mm-hmm. who now has a very successful business. She has written a book called The Suitcase Entrepreneur, and has a great 6-figure business. But she said that one of the regrets that she has if she looks back on the early days of her business is that she took too long to kind of get going, because early on she was investing almost all her time, like 8 hours a day, interacting on social media. And the key thing, she was not like wasting time on social media. It's not like she was reading listicles on BuzzFeed or something like that. She was doing things that felt like work, posting on forums and interacting with people and that kind of stuff. But the truth is that is illusory work. Like, being active online is a nice long-term strategy, but it is not going to get you clients right away. What is going to get you clients right away is building your email list and asking for referrals. Those are the things that is the real work that brings money in the door. And she says that she wishes she had focused more on that early on.
So that brings up another good point, because there's those things that you're going to do behind closed doors, like getting referrals, getting clients, building your email list, that people may not see. But then I think a lot of people want to focus on those things that are seen, because I feel like it's building them that social proof. So is there a balance that you need to strike between what you do behind the scenes, whereas you might be doing well but nobody really knows what it is that you're doing, versus being out in the open as you're trying to build something where people know who you are and recognize you for your expertise?
Yeah, so this speaks to a story that I tell in the book about a guy named Michael Parrish Dudell,
Okay.
who wrote a book based on the television show Shark Tank.
Okay.
And he has a concept, kind of a framework that I thought was really good, which he calls mind share versus market share.
Okay.
And so mind share, as the name implies, is about, how do you get known? How do you get yourself out there? And that might be stuff like being on television or being quoted in the papers or something like that. Those are things that are really legitimately important in terms of your social proof, in terms of your brand recognition, but they are not going to pay the bills. And so that's why he likes to balance it with what he calls market share plays. And those are the things that are going to pay the bills, but oftentimes they're quiet things.
Right.
It might be that you're doing a consulting engagement with a company. Well, that's great, but aside from the people that you work with at that company, maybe it's 5 people or something, no one else knows about it. No one else sees it. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of invisible. So if you only do that, you might make good money, but no one's going to have heard of you, and you'll eventually run out of customers because, there's only so many people that people can refer you to. If you only do a mind share play, then that's great. You might get to be pretty well known, but be in the situation we talked about earlier where you're pretty well known, but you have no clients. So you've got to balance them if you want to be smart about it.
Okay, so how do you, because I think, how do you balance that, your time in doing some of those things? Because I think that's where people kind of get stuck, especially depending on whenever they're first getting started. They want to make that money. They want to get that money. So they can keep the lights on and continue being an entrepreneur and growing. So is there like a percentage split that you recommend, or is there, how did you go about doing it whenever you were building your business?
Yeah, so I would say early on, you should focus on getting the money.
Mm-hmm.
You need to build a business that will be solvent for you. But if I were to offer percentages, I would say, broadly speaking, think about it over time. You do a huge proportion, disproportionately large amount of sales.
Okay.
And then over time, you shrink that down and you start doing more and more marketing.
Okay.
And I'm defining marketing as the longer range activities. And you're able to do that because you've already gotten a base with sales of money coming in the door. So let's pretend early on you do 80% sales and 20% marketing. Mm-hmm. Later in your business, you do 80% marketing and 20% sales.
Got it, because it sort of replaces it, because the marketing that you're going to do is going to help you with that sales down the line. Perfect. Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So I guess that kind of answers the question, because one of the things that you said, another quote that I loved, was, the truth is, working to become a recognized expert and build a successful business takes time. And for a while, it is a zero-sum game, which a lot of people don't want to hear. So the time you invest in a long-term growth is time taken away from short-term revenue-generating activities. So is that just something that do you have to work hard to prepare people for that reality, in terms of knowing that some of the activities that you do, you're going to have to sacrifice a little bit for the long-term benefit that you're going to get as a result of it?
Yeah, it is a challenge, right? Some people are never able to break into the next level because they are not willing to give up the easy gratification of instant money.
Okay.
So if you stay in the mode of just doing sales forever, for instance, I mean, hats off to people who do that, because it's hard to be good at sales in this kind of person to person, let's ask for the business, let's ask for the referral. But if that remains the only thing that you do, you can grow your business incrementally. You can never grow your business exponentially, because growing it exponentially requires scale. And to achieve scale, you're not going to get it from like asking somebody for a referral to their colleague. You're going to get it because you start blogging and lots of people read your blog, and then someone reads your blog and says, oh, this is great, you should speak to this conference, and then 1,000 people hear you speak at the conference. That's how you start to get scale.
For sure. Now, going through all this, we talked a little about this before, it is a lot of work and it is a lot of effort. But it also takes a great degree of focus, which means that you have to know how to spend your time, which I know is a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. A lot of people don't talk about it, but time management is a big aspect of balancing these different buckets of your business and being able to play short and long term at the same time. Do you have any specific time management habits or tricks or hacks that have worked especially well for you as you've been doing all this and have been prolific in your writing and all these other managing all these other streams of income that you have?
Yeah. I definitely think a lot about time management because certainly, especially now, as we're filming this, I'm getting ready to launch the book.
Yes.
So it becomes ridiculous. You're every single 15-minute block of your day is accounted for. So it actually drives me crazy when I hear these sort of self-help things, and they're like, cut out your television, you'll save 3 hours a day. I'm like, who on earth is watching 3 hours of television a day? I mean, I'm sure people somewhere, I used to do that when I was a kid, but no one I know who is a successful working professional is doing that. Right. Now, I'm not talking about when, whatever, Game of Thrones is released and you watch it for 72 hours. That's different. But if just like every day it's like, I'll just watch this. Like, no, that's ridiculous. Successful people have already cut that out. We need to talk about a higher and more refined thing. The easy wins are already gone. Right. You have to take it to the next level. And so I even developed an online course about this, actually, to sort of promulgate my philosophy. It's called Be More Productive.
Okay.
And anyway, one of the key things that I talk about there, which has been very influential for me, is an essay written by Paul Graham, who's a thinker in Silicon Valley, and he wrote an essay called Manager's Schedule, Maker's Schedule. Okay. And he talks about the different needs of a manager, meaning somebody who's sort of overseeing a lot of projects. That person needs to check in with people a lot, just to kind of keep the wheels turning. So they are going to have a day that is marked by, okay, every half hour, it's like a meeting, phone call, meeting, phone call. A maker, on the other hand, i.e. someone who is expected to create something. This could be a writer, this could be a software coder,
right.
Just someone who's creating a generative product. If that person has meetings every 30 minutes, they're going to be dead. They're going to be unproductive, because you need large swaths of blank space and empty time in order to be able to create effectively. And so consequently, as a result, one of the things that I do is I structure my time. Again, all things are out the window during book launch time. But when I get back to normal, it's I have a very deliberate schedule where I have manager days and maker days.
Okay.
And so for an entire day, sometimes, so like let's pretend Monday is a manager day. I'll have 9 meetings. I'll have them, back to back to back to back. It's just like, what? Let's do them all. And it's very intense. But the reason I do it is to keep Tuesday and Thursday completely open. Okay. Literally nothing during those days, because I want to protect that time for creative endeavors.
No, that's definitely helpful. And I have that. I have Mondays and Tuesdays are my writing days. So I have no meetings on those days, but just because the break in your productivity and your concentration and all that other stuff it's difficult to get back into that creative space. So are there things that you do aside? Are there things that you say no to? That you just were like, listen, if I want to be able to do these things, there's only so many things that I can do on my manager's day in particular. are there certain activities that you say, all right, these are the things I'm going to allow space for within my schedule, and are there specific things that you're just like, you know what, these are the things that I'm putting off. These are the things that I'm just going to say, this is not going to be. I'm not going to be great at this. I'm not going to go ahead and invest my time in this. How do you make that distinction so that you're able to keep that balance?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of things that I do in this regard. One thing that I would say is that I often I think the biggest change really for anyone is just not defaulting to the other person's assumptions.
Okay.
There's kind of these cultural assumptions, right? So if people want to get together, it's, oh, let's set up a coffee, let's set up a lunch. And it's a very high bar for me to set up a coffee or set up a lunch. I will do that almost never.
Okay.
And instead, what I will do is I will invite that person to a group event.
Okay.
And that way I can, odds are they just want to meet. They just want to connect. It's not like they really need to spend an hour with me. So instead, I'll spend an hour or a couple hours with like 10 people.
Right.
And if they have questions or they want to talk to me or whatever, we can do that. But I'm bringing together a lot of people all at once. So that is a lot more effective. And then another thing that I will commonly do is if people are interested in possibly talking about a project or something like that, they'll be like, well, let's hop on a call. And I'm like, let's not hop on a call. And instead, I will ask them to email me details first. This cuts out, I swear to you, 75% of the phone calls because they'll want to hop on a call to talk about a speech. And, okay, great, it might be awesome, but oh, guess what? They want me to come to Guam, and the speech is unpaid, and it's on my birthday. It's like, no, absolutely not. And I don't need to be on the phone with you for half an hour to hear about that. Like, if you just literally tell me what is the date, what are the arrangements, what is your budget, then I can tell you if this is something that's realistic for us to talk about. And then if it's realistic for me and it's realistic for you, then let's have a call and let's see if it's a good fit. And we can do that. But it doesn't even make any sense if I'm already booked for another talk or you don't have any budget or something
Right.
like that.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So, what do you do for networking? Because I know you mentioned whenever you were writing for Forbes, you were meeting all these different people, and how do you balance that? Because I think sometimes people, as they're building their relationships, they're building their network, which is an important thing to do. They invest the time in that, but sometimes the time in that can, like a quick coffee, or I want to check in with this person, I want to stay in touch with that person, sometimes that can take on a life of its own and suck a lot of your time. So how do you sort of keep the reins on that?
Yeah, I think that's important. And the way that I think about networking is that it's an activity that in some ways should go in waves.
Okay.
In the sense that at different points in your career, it's going to be more important for you to network than others.
Okay.
Now, you should never stop networking. I mean, that's a bad move, obviously. Like, you want to keep having a reasonably refreshed network. But early in your career, you want to do lots of it. That's the time. Like, you got to meet people. You've got to get things going. And so I would say, if you're just starting out, spend a disproportionate amount of your time networking.
Okay.
And, really go nuts with it. Once you get more established, once you start like getting clients and stuff, you're going to want to spend some time working. So cut back a little bit on the networking.
For
Like, it's all
sure.
cool. For me, I moved to New York 3 years ago. That was a new environment for me. So if you're in a new place, you need to over-index on networking. Now that I'm, like in book launch mode, I'm not doing very much at all because I just have a lot of other things to do, but I'll come back to it. That being said, though, too, you want to leave yourself open enough to possibilities.
Right.
In a few hours after this chat, I'm actually going to an event. I don't really even have time to do it because I'm kind of busy with this book launch. But my friend David reached out, and he had gotten an invitation to this cool event that's like an authors gathering, and it's organized by this woman who's kind of a prominent author. I don't know any of these people, and it's just like an entry point into a social circle that I don't know at all.
Okay.
And I thought, these could be good people to know. Like, I should just make an effort here. So I'm doing it.
That's a good point. That's a good point. And I think it's a good distinction. Like you need to cultivate the network, but don't let it be all that you do, but don't not do it at the same time. So any parting words of wisdom, Dorie, for people who are trying to level up and be more entrepreneurial, to build multiple streams of income and to grow their business exponentially versus just incrementally?
Yes, exponential growth. Well, one thing that I will mention, Sonia, that people might be interested in, is if they want to think more about how to create multiple income streams in their business and really monetize successfully. I have a free resource. It is the 88 question entrepreneurial you self-assessment that walks people through how to create multiple income streams in their own business, and they can get it for free at dorieclark.com/entrepreneur.
Sweet. I will have that in the show notes as well. It was a fantastic book. I recommend everybody go out and get it because there's just lots of great pearls and gems that'll just make you think about the way you operate your business. So highly recommended. Dorie, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you again for stopping by, for chatting with me again about all the cool things that you've been working on. It's been super helpful.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. Maybe eventually I'll learn Spanish too, and then we can do this in Spanish.
Absolutely, that'll be great.
I know, right now I'm not too helpful. I'm just like, vamos a la playa.
Sí. That my answer will always be yes to that question. All right, thank you again, Dorie.